Beyond each mountain pass, Kyrgyzstan reveals a different landscape. Green valleys open beneath snow-covered peaks. Dry plateaus stretch toward distant ridges, and narrow roads follow rivers through the high country. The journey begins in Bishkek, a modern capital spread across the broad Chui Valley, with the Tian Shan rising to the south. From there, the road enters the mountains before reaching Issyk-Kul, a vast blue lake surrounded by towns, dry shores, and snowy ranges. Farther east, Karakol leads toward the forests and red rock formations of Jeti-Aguz. Deeper inland, Song-Kul lies among high summer pastures where livestock horses and seasonal yurt camps return during the warmer months. Beyond the grasslands, the roads continue toward Narin and the drier valleys of the interior. Across Kyrgyzstan, mountains shape the routes, settlements, and seasonal movement that connect modern cities with life in the highlands. This is the unseen Kyrgyzstan, a country of lakes, valleys, mountain roads, and communities living between tradition and change. The journey begins in Bishkek, where broad streets and tree-lined avenues stretch across the Chui Valley beneath the distant Tian Shan. At first glance, the capital feels very different from the image many people associate with Kyrgyzstan. Instead of remote pastures and mountain camps, daily life moves through parks, markets, apartment districts, and busy intersections. The city's layout still carries the influence of the Soviet period. Wide boulevards, public squares, and large green spaces continue to shape many neighborhoods, while rows of apartment buildings form much of the urban landscape. Yet Bishkek is not a city preserved in the past, as new cafes, businesses, and residential developments continue to change its streets. Markets bring another rhythm to the capital. Stalls filled with fruit-bread clothing and household goods draw people from across the city, while buses and cars move constantly between older districts and newer suburbs. These ordinary scenes reveal a modern urban center rather than a place defined only by history. Even within the city, the mountains remain close. On clear days, the snow-covered peaks of the Kyrgyz ranges of the Tian Shan rise beyond the southern skyline. Their presence gives Bishkek a distinctive character, placing a growing capital beside one of Central Asia's great mountain systems. Beyond the outer neighborhoods, the Chu Valley opens into broad farmland and low plains. Villages, fields, and highways spread across the region before the land begins to rise toward the mountains. This is where agriculture, urban growth, and the main routes into the interior come together. A short distance from Bishkek stands the Burana Tower, one of the surviving landmarks connected to a medieval settlement in the valley. Its weathered brick structure offers a brief reminder of the trade routes and communities that once occupied this part of Central Asia. It remains a secondary stop in the journey, rather than the central story of the region. The wider story lies in the relationship between the city and the landscape around it. Bishkek depends on the valley for space transport and agriculture, while the mountains influence its climate, water, and southern horizon. The capital may appear separate from the highlands, but the two are closely connected. As the road leaves, the city buildings become fewer, and the open plain begins to narrow. Rivers flow faster, the slopes rise more sharply, and the distant peaks gradually take control of the view. The journey now moves into the Tian Shan, where the geography of Kyrgyzstan becomes far more dramatic. Beyond Bishkek, the road begins to follow the rising land. The Chu Valley narrows, rivers move faster between rocky slopes, and the mountains that once stood on the horizon begin to shape the route itself. Every turn brings the journey deeper into the high country. The Kyrgyz ranges of the Tian Shan are not a single wall of snow. They contain green valleys, conifer forests, dry ridges, high plateaus, and distant peaks covered in ice. As the elevation changes, the vegetation, temperature, and character of the terrain change with it. Near the capital valleys, such as Ala-Arha, offer an early view of this transition. Mountain rivers run through forested gorges, while trails climb toward exposed rock and higher snowfields. Although these landscapes lie close to Bishkek, they already feel far removed from the broad urban plain below. The mountains begin to control where people can travel and build. Roads follow river valleys, villages settle where the ground becomes wide enough, and bridges connect places divided by steep slopes. The terrain creates limits, but it also determines the routes that keep the region connected. Vehicles, power lines, and small settlements remain visible throughout the valleys. Their presence prevents the mountains from appearing completely isolated from modern life. People continue to live, work, and move through these difficult landscapes, adapting infrastructure to the shape of the land. Higher up, the forests begin to thin. Green hills gradually give way to gray stone, dry grass, and patches of snow in the distance. Clouds move quickly across the ridges, changing the light and visibility from one valley to the next. Water is another constant presence. Streams and rivers descend from snowfields and high slopes, passing through narrow gorges before reaching the lower valleys. These waterways help support settlements, agriculture, and ecosystems far beyond the mountains themselves. The Tian Shan extends across several countries, forming a much larger mountain system through Central Asia. Within Kyrgyzstan, its ranges influence roads, rivers, pastures, and access to the interior. The mountains are not only scenery, but part of the structure that organizes life across much of the country. As the road climbs through passes and enclosed valleys, the landscape can feel severe and restricted. Then, almost without warning, the ground begins to open again. Beyond the last ridges, a vast blue surface appears beneath the mountains. This is Issyk-Kul, a lake so wide that the opposite shore can fade into the horizon. After the narrow valleys of the Tian Shan, its open water creates a sudden sense of space, leading the journey into another side of Kyrgyzstan. After the narrow valleys and steep mountain roads, the landscape suddenly opens. Issyk-Kul stretches beneath the sky like an inland sea, although it is a lake framed by dry shores. Distant settlements and snow-covered ranges in places, the water extends so far that the opposite mountains appear only as a faint line along the horizon. The scale of the lake changes the rhythm of the journey. Roads run for long distances beside the shoreline, passing through towns, villages, and open land where the mountains remain visible beyond the water. The view is expansive, but the coast is not uniform. Along some sections, blue water meets rocky beaches and dry ground. Elsewhere, fields and grasslands reach toward the shore, while houses, hotels, and small resorts mark areas where tourism has become part of the local economy. Issyk-Kul is therefore more than a remote mountain landscape. It is also a lived and developed region. The northern shore contains some of the lake's better-known tourism centers. During the warmer months, beaches, guest houses, and recreational areas draw visitors from across Kyrgyzstan and neighboring countries. Roads become busier, towns grow more active, and the lake takes on the atmosphere of a seasonal destination. Other sections remain quieter. Small settlements appear between stretches of open shoreline with boats, local roads, and grazing land, showing how everyday life continues around the water. These areas do not fit a single image of wilderness or tourism, but reveal the different ways communities use the lake and its surrounding land. The mountains give Issyk-Kul its strongest visual contrast. Snow-covered peaks rise beyond dry slopes while sunlight moves across the water and changes its color from pale blue to deep gray. Clouds gathering over the ranges can leave the shoreline in bright light while the higher ground disappears into shadow. This relationship between water and mountains also shapes the climate around the lake. The broad surface moderates conditions near the shore, creating an environment different from the colder, high plateaus and enclosed valleys farther inland. Settlements, farmland, and tourism have developed around this more accessible landscape. Yurt camps can also be found near parts of the shoreline, but their purpose varies. Some are seasonal accommodation created for visitors offering meals, cultural activities, and overnight stays rather than functioning as pastoral family homes. Their presence shows how traditional forms can take on new roles within the modern tourism economy. The lake remains connected to older patterns of movement as well. Roads around Issyk-Kul link communities' agricultural areas and mountain valleys, while routes leading away from the shore continue towards summer pastures and the eastern highlands. The water may dominate the view, but it belongs to a much wider regional network. As the journey continues east, the shoreline gradually leads toward Kyrgyzstan. Here, the open lake begins to meet a more enclosed world of town streets, forested valleys, and mountain rivers. Beyond the city, the red cliffs of Jetty-Uguz introduce another dramatic change in the landscape. Leaving the eastern shore of Issyk-Kul, the journey arrives in Kyrgyzstan landscape. Leaving the eastern shore, here the movement of water is shaped by rain slope and the natural form of the land. Rain falls heavily across much of Panama's tropical interior. It gathers on mountain ridges, runs through valleys, and feeds streams hidden beneath the forest canopy. These smaller waterways gradually join wider rivers, carrying fresh water toward both sides of the country. The forest holds much of this water before releasing it slowly across the landscape. Roots anchor the soil, vegetation softens the force of rainfall, and shaded ground helps moisture remain within the watershed. Rivers and forests are therefore closely connected, each shaping the other over time. Seen from above, the waterways appear as dark lines winding through endless green. Their banks are often hidden beneath thick vegetation, while clouds gather over the higher ground. In some places, waterfalls descend from rocky slopes before disappearing again beneath the trees. Wildlife moves through these wet landscapes in quieter ways. Birds cross above the canopy, monkeys travel between branches, and smaller animals remain close to rivers and forest pools. Much of this life is heard before it is seen, carried through the trees by calls, movement, and rain. As rivers approach lower ground, the landscape begins to open. Fresh water spreads into wetlands and slow-moving channels where mangroves rise from muddy banks. These sheltered environments form a gradual meeting place between inland water and the sea. The mangroves soften the edge of the coast. Their tangled roots hold sediment, shelter young marine life, and create narrow passages for small boats. Water moves through them, with the tide shifting between river forest and open sea. These waterways rarely receive the same attention as the canal, yet they reveal another side of Panama. They are not designed for global traffic or controlled by steel gates. Their paths follow the older shape of the land, carrying rain from the mountains toward the coast. Along some riverbanks, signs of human life begin to appear. A small dock, a wooden boat, or a house partly hidden by trees breaks the continuity of the forest. The rivers are not only natural corridors, they also provide access to communities living beyond the reach of larger roads. As the channels widen, the forest begins to share the shoreline with homes, boats, and working harbors. Water that began in the highlands now becomes part of daily life, connecting settlements to fishing grounds, neighboring villages, and the wider coast. Boats and working harbors. Water that began in the highlands now becomes part of daily life, connecting settlements to the wider coast. Boats and working harbors. Water that began in the highlands, connecting settlements to fish. Boats and working harbors. Water connecting settlements to fish. Connecting settlements to fish. Connecting settlements to fish. Connecting settlements to fish. Small communities begin to appear where the forest thins and the waterways open toward the coast. Boats rest beside modest docks, houses stand near the shoreline, and narrow paths lead from homes to the water. Here, rivers and bays are not simply part of the landscape, they shape the rhythm of everyday life. Small boats carry people between nearby settlements, fishing grounds, and sheltered coves. Some move quietly through river channels, while others cross broader stretches of coastal water. Their routes follow the natural shape of the land, reaching places where roads remain limited or do not exist at all. Fishing is woven into this daily movement. Boats leave in the softer light of morning, nets are prepared near the shore, and the catch returns to small harbors and local markets. The work depends on tides, weather, and long familiarity with the surrounding water. Along the coast, homes often stand only a short distance from boats and working docks. The boundary between village and harbor is gentle, with daily activity unfolding across porches, beaches, and narrow strips of shoreline. Families, fishermen, and children share the same small spaces beside the sea. In some communities, the harbor becomes the busiest place of the day. Boats arrive with fish passengers or supplies, and the shoreline briefly fills with voices, movement, and work. Once the unloading is finished, the water settles again, and the harbor returns to a quieter pace. Farther inland, river settlements reveal a similar closeness to the water. A canoe tied beneath the trees, a small landing or a house partly hidden by vegetation may be the only visible sign of habitation. The forest remains close, but the river provides a path through it. These waterways also carry the practical needs of daily life. Food, tools, and other supplies arrive by boat, while people travel outward toward larger towns and markets. Each crossing helps maintain connections between communities separated by forest coast and open water. Life here is shaped by changing conditions. Heavy rain can alter a river within hours, while tides determine when boats can approach certain shores. Travel, fishing, and work require patience, experience, and a close reading of the weather. The communities may be small, but their connections reach far beyond a single village. Boats link riverbanks to coastal towns, islands to the mainland, and quiet settlements to wider markets. Water carries people outward and brings news, goods, and visitors back to the shore. As the channels move closer to the sea, the landscape begins to widen. Mangroves open into broad bays, and sheltered waters give way to coastlines shaped by reefs, beaches, and scattered islands. On both sides of Panama, the same relationship continues, but the character of the sea begins to change. Mangroves open into broad bays, give way to coastlines shaped by reefs, beaches, and scattered islands. On both sides of Panama, as the coastline stretches farther from the mainland, Panama begins to open toward islands scattered across two different shores. Some rest within the calmer waters of the Caribbean, while others lie beyond the broad bays of the Pacific. Both belong to the same narrow country, yet each coast has developed its own rhythm and character. On the Caribbean side, islands often appear among sheltered bays, mangroves, and clear tropical water. Small boats travel between beaches, villages, and quiet channels, following routes that have connected coastal communities for generations. The sea feels calm and enclosed, shaped by reefs, islands, and low green shorelines. The Pacific presents a different impression. Wider bays, stronger tides, and longer stretches of open coastline create a landscape that feels broader and more exposed. Here, the shoreline changes with the movement of the water, while islands rise from a horizon that seems to extend much farther into the distance. These differences are gradual rather than absolute. Both coasts contain mangroves, coral reefs, sandy beaches, and fishing grounds. The character of each place depends on its tides, currents, and coastline, giving every island its own relationship with the surrounding sea. Beneath the clear water, coral reefs support a rich marine environment. Along quieter shores, mangroves spread across shallow inlets where roots hold the coastline together and provide shelter for young marine life. These coastal ecosystems protect the land while connecting the sea with the forest behind them. Boats remain an essential part of life on both coasts. They carry people between islands, deliver supplies to small communities, and connect fishing grounds with nearby harbors. Where roads come to an end, the sea continues the journey. Island settlements often grow within narrow strips of land between the coast and the vegetation behind them. Homes, docks, and small fishing boats stand close together, while palms and tropical trees soften the boundary between village and shoreline. The sea is never far away, becoming part of everyday life rather than simply the view beyond it. Although the Caribbean and Pacific offer different landscapes, they reveal the same dependence on water. Communities learn the changing tides, the weather, and the safest routes between islands, adapting their daily lives to conditions that are always shifting. Looking across these islands, it becomes clear that Panama is shaped by more than the famous canal running through its center. Rivers, forests, villages, coastlines, and across Panama, water appears in many different forms. It surrounds the coast, moves through rivers and lakes, gathers beneath the rainforest, and carries ships across the center of the country. Cities, villages, forests, and islands all exist within this same network. Panama City rises beside the Pacific, where towers, roads, and working harbors meet the bay. Farther inland, the canal passes through locks, freshwater lakes, and forested channels. Beyond the shipping route, smaller rivers continue toward wetlands, mangroves, and coastal communities. The Caribbean and Pacific shape the country from opposite sides. Their coastlines are not identical, yet both support islands, fishing grounds, mangroves, and settlements closely tied to the sea. Between them, the land remains narrow enough for water to influence nearly every part of life. Boats move through this landscape at very different scales. Cargo ships cross between oceans, while fishing boats travel between villages, islands, and sheltered bays. Each follows a different route, but all depend on Panama's waterways. The canal may be the country's most famous passage, but it is only one part of a much wider relationship with water. Rainfall feeds rivers and reservoirs. Forests help protect watersheds, and coastal ecosystems soften the meeting point between land and sea. This connection is visible even in the smallest places. A house beside a river, a canoe beneath the trees, or a dock along a quiet island shore all reflect the same closeness to water. It shapes movement, work, and the way communities remain connected. As a slender green land between two blue horizons. Ships move through its center, rivers spread beneath the forest, and islands extend beyond both coastlines. The country is narrow, but the landscapes held within it are remarkably varied. As daylight fades, the water continues to move. A cargo vessel advances through the canal. Small boats return toward the shore, and rivers carry rain from the interior toward the sea. Panama is not simply a canal between two oceans. It is a country shaped by the water on both sides and by the forest rising between them.